So President Trump just concluded his second big press conference on the Wu flu. And while I'm tempted to talk about that, I think I'll wait until tomorrow because I want to do things in order. And, before I talk about all these updates that we got from the Wu flu, I do want to talk about the fact that something that I've been following since I started this channel is the ongoing peace negotiations with the Taliban over ending the war in Afghanistan. A story that really went largely uncovered the whole time this was going on. These negotiations have been going on for a very long time. Trump appointed a special envoy in Zalmay Khalilzad to go over there and, who speaks the Taliban's language. He's a member of their sect. He speaks Pashto or Pashtun or whatever, whatever you call the language. And he's from Afghanistan, and he also happens to be a neoconservative, which is quite interesting. So he's kind of, one of their greatest enemies, but at the same time, he understands them at a deep level. And he had a lot of success, at least it would seem, in trying to work with them and hammer out this deal. And now, after many months of hearing about, how the deal was completed, it has now finally been signed by both sides. And so this is tremendous news. We still don't really have details. We just have what's been leaked in the media, or not even really leaked, just outright said. There's going to be obviously reductions in troop numbers, and today during the Wu flu conference, President Trump discussed this quite a bit. And of course he said, it was kind of funny. He made the point that, well, over there, we're not really fighting a war. We're just, we're essentially acting as law enforcement. Which, is kind of true. You're an occupying army. That's what you're doing. And he said, that's not really what our troops want to do. They want to go and fight real wars. They don't want to go be policemen. And you know what? I don't even care what his justification is, as long as he gets them out. As long as the result is good, I don't care how he thinks about it. Is that a dumb way of framing things? Yeah, but, I could nitpick that. But you have to understand, the audience he's speaking to. I mean, he's trying to tell... a Republican audience, essentially, his voters, that, hey, we're going to turn tail and run in Afghanistan, and that's great. How is he going to sell that? I think that the fact that he's even able to come out and do this at all is a miracle. And it really does show, the power of Trump's personality, that he's able to. If Obama had done this, it would have been apocalyptic as far as, the talk radio sphere was concerned. But somehow, Trump was able to get through to Republican voters and make them realize that, this whole thing in Afghanistan really has gone on way too long. And it's, it's no longer a bad joke. It's just bad. So he gave a little bit more of an insight into what the details of this are. I guess he said that part of the deal is that, Afghanistan is going to be killing terrorists for us after the U.S. leaves. I can't help but I almost have to laugh at this. Because, if you don't laugh, you almost have to cry, because this is exactly what the Taliban offered the U.S. Before they invaded Afghanistan. The Taliban said, hey, we'll work with you to try and hunt down terrorists. We just ask that you give us a little bit of evidence that, before we go and, kill this guy, that he really is the one behind your attack. Anybody remember that? I mean, it wasn't reported too widely, but I mean, they did put it in the New York Times that had their obligatory article saying, hey, the Taliban says, we're going to work with you. We're just fine. Let's negotiate. We're happy to do that. Don't invade our country. And the U.S. said, no, we want blood, so we're going to invade Afghanistan, even though, the Taliban were not the ones who organized this or helped them or assisted the Al-Qaeda in any way. And so now 20 years later, we make a peace deal with them, right? And what's the deal? It's exactly what they offered the U.S. 20 years ago. The same offer still stands. Hey, we'll help you fight these terrorists because we don't want them either. We want to have control over our country. We don't necessarily want these Arab jihadis coming in here. And so I think that people really, even if it's a little hard to swallow right now, maybe it's not the best idea to do this until everything's finalized and the troops are out. But people need to realize that absolutely nothing was accomplished over the last 20 years. The Taliban controls just as much now as they did then. They control the parts of the country where their ethnic group is in the majority. And frankly, all that the U.S. has been doing by staying in Afghanistan has been, somewhat limiting the Taliban's influence to those areas. Now, of course, in the absence of the U.S., what happened before was that the Taliban controlled the whole of the country, where they are both the minority and the majority. And that probably will happen again, because they're the only well-organized, you could say, to a certain extent, at least. They're the only cohesive fighting force in the country. And so it should be relatively easy for them to reconquer the rest of Afghanistan in the absence of the U.S. presence. All the billions of dollars, trillions actually, spent on trying to build up this so-called Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, which again, if the U.S. is trying to create this perfect model government in Afghanistan, why are you making it Islamic? Isn't the whole, don't the people who scream and whine about, oh, we need to have separation of church and state, weren't they involved in writing the Afghan constitution? I mean, they put Islamic right in the name, and this is supposed to be an American puppet government. At least the communists in the Soviet Union were smart enough when they installed their puppet government. They said, why don't we make this government run by people who think like us? Why don't we put communists in charge of Afghanistan if we're going to conquer it? It makes sense, right? And to be honest, the U.S. did, of course, put puppet people, who are Americans, essentially. Well, actually, I think in the case of Ghani, or Ghazni, I always forget his name, he actually is an American citizen. I believe he worked, he did work here. He was a professor in the U.S., speaks English perfectly fine. So, he is in a way still, an American puppet, but it's just, I just find it weird that the Constitution doesn't emulate the United States. It's not based on the U.S. at all. But hey, minor nitpick, because that, it doesn't matter, because that government is meaningless. Probably won't last for very long after the U.S. pulls out. And, that's going to be something probably that people will blame Trump for. But if I were him, I would, not worry about it, because, there's no winning here. And so hopefully, now that this deal is signed, it will be somewhat binding, because, of course, now the U.S. has said they're going to pull out. It's one thing for them to say it, and it's another thing for them to actually do it. So I'll be interested to see to what extent this deal is implemented. And, I would imagine if the Taliban actually agreed to it, then the deal must be a total withdrawal of the U.S. I can't see the Taliban agreeing to much else. And so we'll have to see if that actually materializes. Elsewhere in the Middle East, of course, this whole smoldering dumpster fire in northern Syria is still burning. And we're starting to see some pictures come in from Greece of these refugees who are unleashed by the Turks on Europe, and things are not looking too good. They've set up these impromptu camps just on the border. I think that this isn't a huge international story right now. I don't think, but it will be here very soon, because things are probably going to get bad. You're going to have a lot of people here. You're going to have a lot of sickness spreading. I'd imagine, I can't imagine if the Wu flu, I said this the other day, if the Wu flu gets into this refugee population as they're just, moving across like a plague of locusts, it will be absolutely devastating for the Europeans, who undoubtedly will welcome them with open arms, because refugees welcome, right? And the reason, of course, why these refugees have to flee Syria and Turkey and why they can't just go home is because the U.S. is supporting Erdogan and trying to prolong the Syrian civil war for some ungodly reason, because it's not like the opposition is going to win, and to no apparent end, they're just stirring up trouble and creating chaos. So while that wasn't really, I didn't even intend to talk about that today, I will be keeping an eye on that and the situation in Afghanistan, because there aren't very many bright spots in the world these days. So if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. If you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.